In the eastern region of the Ultima Segmentum, archaeological survey teams and deep space archaeotech drones recorded unsettling evidence on several worlds marked by Ork presence. On these planets, surface features included colossal depressions and ground scarring that could not be attributed solely to massed infantry or armoured assaults. Orbital spectral scans detected residual heat signatures in the subsurface strata, consistent with ancient combustion engines of extraordinary scale. Subsequent pict feed analysis revealed humanoid silhouettes standing atop ruins of enormous mechanical structures that once moved and fired weapons across battlefields. These findings were initially met with skepticism among Imperial Astrotech analysts, but as more detailed pict feeds from multiple star systems were correlated, a consistent pattern emerged. Detailed reconstructions of recovered imagery indicate that the Ork superweapons, colloquially referred to as Mega Gargants by field operatives, are an evolution of the established Gargant class of Ork war machine. Standard Gargants, as documented in multiple war logs, are massive, sometimes humanoid-shaped combat walkers built by Ork Mekboys under what is described in Ork myth and anthropological studies as divine inspiration. This vision, attributed to the Ork gods Gork and Mork, is reported by Ork shamans and interpreted by xenologists as a cultural mechanism that drives Mekboys to embark on constructing gargantuan fighting machines from raw scrap, salvaged hull sections, and repurposed industrial engines. On worlds where pict feeds captured early Gargants, these machines often exhibited bipedal locomotion, supported by mechanical legs and a central body heavily armoured with welded plates of differing gauges and origins, consistent with the Ork engineering ethos of use what works. The Mega Gargant, while conceptually an extension of this practice, diverges from the typical walker form in both scale and structural design. Canonical sources describe the Mega Gargant as a very rare, super-large variant of the Gargant that rivals in size the Imperium's Imperator-class Titans, albeit lacking equivalent power output or engineering sophistication. Unlike most Gargants, which employ articulated mechanical legs for locomotion, Mega Gargants are supported on tracked platforms or massive continuous tread assemblies. This transition from leg-based movement to tracked propulsion appears to have been adopted by Ork Mekboys to support the greater mass and weapon loads of these machines, essentially transforming them into mobile fortresses capable of traversing varied terrain without the mechanical complexity of scaled-up limbs. The initiation of a Mega Gargant construction project in an Ork-controlled system is usually preceded by a large-scale war, identified by Imperial intelligence as a mobilization signal for hundreds of thousands of Orks and their war fleets converging on a campaign objective. Mekboys, often under the sanction or coercion of a warboss, collect industrial scrap, crashed vessels, derelict hull sections, and abandoned starship reactors to begin assembly. The presence of a Mega Gargant under construction has been used by Imperial strategists as a predictor of a prolonged engagement, often necessitating the deployment of additional defensive assets due to the anticipated destructive capacity of the machine once operational. Construction of these machines is not standardized in any technical sense. Instead, each Mega Gargant is unique in configuration and armament, reflecting the Mekboy engineer's imagination, available materials, and the specific demands of the Ork warband. Field reports compiled by Adeptus Mechanicus reconnaissance detachments indicate that construction methods combine crude welding, heavy bolting, and the integration of salvaged power cores, often without precise planning. Despite their crude exterior, Mega Gargants house immensely complex internal frameworks of drive shafts, boilers, turbines, and oversized combustion chambers that dwarf any conventional Ork vehicle. Unlike human or mechanicum constructs, Mega Gargants lack unified central processing units or advanced computerized guidance systems. Instead, the machine's operation is directed through a network of mechanical linkages and communication tubes that carry vocal commands and hand signals from the command crew to the engine and weapons crews. Assessment of power sources for these superweapons is derived largely from intercepted technical annotations, recovered wreckage examinations, and thermal emission readings. In most recorded cases, Mega Gargants appear to utilize one or more massive internal combustion engines fed by a combination of refined fuels and ad hoc propellants. These engines drive hydraulic pumps and turbine assemblies, supplying motive force to the tracks and generating sufficient power to operate the vast array of weapon systems mounted on the machine's armoured frame. Power conduits observed in the internal schematics of wreckage suggest that the primary engines also feed auxiliary systems such as power amplification coils for energy-based weapons, and heavy-duty actuators for weapon turrets and defensive emplacements. A recurring characteristic across picked feeds and recovered fragments is the conspicuous absence of any form of advanced energy shielding or self-regenerating defense fields, such as those employed by Imperial Titans. Instead, the armour of Mega Gargants relies on sheer thickness and redundancy, with irregular plates overlapped in rough-hewn layers. This design philosophy emphasises durability under sustained fire rather than technological sophistication. Field interrogations and documented analyses by Mechanicus combat engineers have noted that while the armour plating can absorb significant damage, the lack of integrated energy shielding increases vulnerability to high penetration and weaponry, requiring Mega Gargants to rely upon overwhelming offensive capability and brute force to dominate engagements. It remains clear from cross-referenced accounts that the Ork belief system plays a significant role in the construction and function of Mega Gargants. Literary and xenological studies describe the Ork psyche as uniquely intertwined with their machinery. The physical presence of a Gargant or Mega Gargant serves as both a tactical weapon and a cultural symbol. Ork war psychers, or weird boys, generate psychic emanations during war surges that appear to resonate with the Ork's latent psychosocial connections to their war machines. Some theories suggest that this psychic component contributes to the cohesion of the Mega Gargant's internal systems, allowing the crew to operate complex machinery through intuitive coordination rather than formal control systems. This hypothesis remains unconfirmed in official Mechanicus reports, and it is considered a subject for further study rather than established fact. Because each Mega Gargant is distinct and assembled under decentralized conditions, there is no universal template one can define for their construction. However, experts in the Adeptus Mechanicus have noted recurrent architectural themes, such as the use of multiple redundant engine banks to prevent catastrophic failure, large main turrets mounted on the forward sections of the hull, and secondary mountings distributed laterally to provide overlapping fire arcs. The arrangement of crew quarters, ammunition stores, and engine rooms within the interior is understood indirectly from blast patterns and wreckage mapping, suggesting a patchwork of compartments accessible via ladders, catwalks, and bulkheads ingeniously butchered together from various sources. The earliest documented references to Mega Gargants in Imperial records trace back to fragmented transmissions from war zones, where Ork forces were first observed to employ Gargant technology on an unprecedented scale. In these engagements, Imperial commanders reported seismic-like ground tremors and overwhelming artillery barrages directed by massive walkers that dwarfed standard battlefield vehicles. Analysis of combat recordings indicates that the power sources employed by Mega Gargants are capable of sustaining prolonged operations without immediate refueling, though the logistical strain on Ork supply chains is considerable by the end of this segment. Imperial servitors and Mechanicus analysts tasked with compiling technical dossiers on Mega Gargants have faced significant challenges. Unlike Adeptus Mechanicus produced vehicles, these machines lack standard blueprints or build documentation. Each Mega Gargant is a unique construct reflecting the improvisational engineering ethos of Ork Mekboys. Despite this variability, there are recurring measurable attributes that can be discerned when collating data from multiple engagements where Mega Gargants were deployed. Mega Gargants are among the largest Ork war machines observed, often ranging between 200 meters and 300 meters in height, when fully upright on their support systems. Some picked feed reconstructions suggest even larger specimens when additional superstructure or armaments were retrofitted during campaign preparations. The overall mass of these constructs varies widely, but has been roughly estimated from gravimetric analysis to lie between 10,000 metric tons and 25,000 metric tons. By comparison, an Imperator-class Titan of the Adeptus Titanicus is heavier, but Mega Gargants rival smaller war engines and stationary fortresses in sheer mass. This size inherently drives much of the machine's performance characteristics. The basic structural framework of a Mega Gargant typically consists of a reinforced central chassis mounted on either massive conveyor tread systems or paired tracked platforms. In many recovered images, these treads are as wide as Titan servitors and span hundreds of meters. This design is a pragmatic departure from the legged locomotion of smaller Gargants. Instead of hydraulic hip joints, knee actuators, and the complex balancing mechanisms required for dynamic walking motion, the tracked system distributes weight more stably and reduces mechanical failure points. On uneven or rugged terrain, these tracked treads still suffer from mobility limitations. Large rocks, deep craters, or structural collapse zones can impede progress. Nevertheless, the tracks allow long marches across open battlefields without the constant need for repair that legged constructs of similar scale would demand. The propulsion system supporting these tracked platforms relies on arrays of oversized internal combustion engines unequalled in any other Ork war machine. Mechanicus transcripts refer to them as spinal banks due to their longitudinal installation along the Mega Gargant's central axis. These engines burn a hybrid propellant mix derived from refined luted fuels, secondary hydrocarbon derivatives scavenged from wrecked war fleets, and crude volatile compounds synthesized by Ork Chem Mech converts. The unpredictable composition of these fuels results in variable performance outputs, but picked feeds confirm these engines generate tremendous torque that propels the immense machine across relatively short distances at speeds comparable to slow-moving dreadnoughts or medium-sized walkers. Quantitative speed estimates are difficult to pin down due to the variable fuel mixes and differing terrain, but surviving Imperial scrolls indicate an average operational speed of 2 to 4 km per hour on flat terrain. In rare instances where Mega Gargants traverse gently graded plains, record visual tracking over time suggests peak speeds approaching 6 to 8 km per hour for short bursts. These figures place them far below the sprint capacity of Ork warbikes, battle tanks, or infantry on rapid assault vectors. Mega Gargants are not designed for maneuver warfare or fast redeployment. Their movement is deliberate, slow, and geared toward bringing their weapon systems into effective range rather than dynamic repositioning. Strength characteristics of Mega Gargants are perhaps their most defining specification. The engineered superstructure, composed of alternating welded plate sections of varying thickness, gives them extremely high physical resilience. Plate thickness in the primary frontal arcs has been estimated in Mechanicus armor penetration tables at upwards of 7 to 10 meters equivalent armor depth when accounting for multiple overlapping layers. This does not equate to a unified energy shielding capability, but does result in a redundancy of protection, where one plate may stop a penetrating munition, while the next layer absorbs residual force. Secondary and rear armor plating is thinner, but still far exceeds that of most battlefield vehicles observed across human and Xenos factions. Despite this mass, the internal framework of girders, struts, and bulk reinforcement beams has significant structural weaknesses linked to the way Ork engineers integrate salvaged materials. Welds and mechanical joints are inconsistent, lacking the precision tolerances of human or mechanicum fabrication. This means that while Mega Gargants can absorb staggering amounts of punishment, once certain key support structures are compromised, entire sections of the machine can collapse or shear off under their own weight. Imperial battle reports often describe a Mega Gargant continuing to fire some of its weapons, even after losing entire weapon platforms or control compartments, underscoring both the redundancy and the fragility inherent in their design ethos. Crew accommodation within a Mega Gargant is as improvised as its external design. Mechanicus forensics of wrecked interiors indicate rows of reinforced pens, where Ork crewmen operate pumps, tend engines, feed ammunition, and maintain weapons. Despite the size of the machine, crew quarters are cramped, with little attention given to ergonomic comfort or environmental controls. Heat from the engines, vibration from the track systems, and noise levels recorded in surviving audio fragments exceed what most Imperium servitors are engineered to withstand. Yet Ork crews show remarkable resilience and adaptiveness to these conditions, a factor that partly explains why these machines can remain operational in environments that would immobilize human crews. Weapon systems on Mega Gargants are diverse but can be grouped into categories based on firing mechanism and tactical role. Some of the most common are heavy projectile cannons mounted in turrets on the forward superstructure. These cannons vary in bore diameter, with many exceeding 12 meters in width. Imperial ballistic specialists have compared the destructive yields of these weapons to late-era basilisks, or even weaker variants of Baneblade siege cannons. Ork doctrine surrounding projectile weapons emphasizes kinetic force and explosive yield, without regard for ammunition efficiency or recoil control. This results in devastating battlefield effects, but also places enormous stress on the structural mounts of the Mega Gargant itself. Energy-based weapons are also evident in many picked feeds. These include colossal beams projected from oversized emitter arrays, integrated into the flanks and dorsal sections of the machine. Analysis of these emitters suggests they function through crude amplification coils wrapped around power conduits fed directly from the Mega Gargant's internal engine turbines. Energy discharge events recorded in picked feeds show broad arc plasma blasts and thermal overpressure fields that scorch terrain, vaporize lighter vehicles, and disrupt formations. However, these systems lack focused targeting arrays or stabilization platforms, meaning their accuracy diminishes sharply at extended ranges. They are most effective in close to intermediate engagements and in saturation bombardment rather than precision strikes. Secondary armaments include rapid-fire projectile batteries, often mounted along the lateral sections of the Mega Gargant's hull. These weapons are typically salvaged rotary cannons, looted missile pods, or even repurposed anti-aircraft batteries stripped from wrecked battlecruisers. Ork crews frequently feed these secondary systems manually, or through reinforced chute systems constructed ad hoc during assembly. Despite their haphazard installation, these weapons contribute significant suppressive fire against infantry, light vehicles, and aircraft when the Mega Gargant approaches contested objectives. Ork melee gear integrated into Mega Gargants is less frequent but no less formidable. Some picked feeds and wreckage studies show massive saw blades, spiked rams, and reinforced striking arms mounted on frontal or lateral pylons. These implements are used primarily during close quarters engagements where the precision of ranged weapons is of limited utility. The sheer mass of the Mega Gargant means that contact with enemy fortifications or armoured vehicles often results in catastrophic structural failure for the opposing force. Weighted rams have been recorded crushing fortified bastions and reducing enemy armour to unrecognisable debris. The psychological effect of these close quarters encounters on opposing forces is noted in Imperial after-action reports as profound, contributing to rapid collapse of morale among units unable to mount counter-battery fire. Defensive gear on Mega Gargants is sparse by comparison with their offensive capacity. Ork engineers rarely incorporate energy shielding, deflector arrays, or reactive armour fields. When facing factions capable of high penetration and firepower, such as Adeptus Astartes battle squads equipped with melter bombs or void laser batteries, the exposed mechanical joints and non-uniform armour layering can become catastrophic weak points. Some Mega Gargants compensate for this by deploying external barricade systems constructed of looted tank turrets, wreckage piles, and anti-aircraft shields dragged along by secondary traction units. These improvised screens serve to complicate targeting solutions for enemy gunners, but they do not equate to integrated protective systems and are often discarded under heavy fire. One of the most remarkable specifications of Mega Gargants is the apparent absence of centralized sensory arrays or sophisticated targeting computers. Instead, crews rely on a network of visual observers stationed at vantage points within the machine and primitive optic lenses mounted on protruding sensor masts. These sensor systems vary widely in configuration from one Mega Gargant to another, often assembled from scavenged targeting lenses and refitted astropathic amplifiers. The result is a sensor suite that is rudimentary, prone to disruption, and highly dependent on human interpretation rather than automated targeting feedback. Imperial sensor analysis suggests that this deficiency is counterbalanced by sheer brute force and redundancy of weapons. If one system fails to engage a target, another, larger system often takes its place. By aggregating details from multiple engagements and documented reconstructions, analysts conclude that Mega Gargants are strategically deployed as siege breakers and mobile artillery fortresses rather than maneuver strike units. Their slow speed, massive weaponry, and overwhelming presence exert both physical and psychological pressure on enemy formations. They are not agile, they are not precise, they are designed to endure punishment and deliver devastation to fortified positions and battle lines through sheer size and firepower. Mega Gargants, like all Ork constructs, are not piloted in the human sense of an individual at a control panel issuing precise commands to a machine. The internal architecture of a Mega Gargant incorporates a distributed crew structure comprised of dozens to hundreds of Ork Mekboys, Gretchen assistants, artillery crews, and assorted support personnel, all operating within the massive hull. Imperial analysts, compiling Mechanicus reports and interrogating captured Ork crewmen after battles, have described the Mega Gargant's internal command arrangement as chaotic but functional, a network of human effective control points rather than a centralized bridge or cockpit space akin to those seen in Imperial Titans or Adeptus Astartes Warwalkers. Primary command functions appear to be conducted from an upper superstructure chamber, a reinforced section of the Mega Gargant that offers a broad field of vision over the surrounding battlefield. In many picked feed frames, this command node is identifiable by large, heavily reinforced viewports or optic lenses mounted high on the machine's forward sections. Within this chamber, one or more of the Warboss's chosen Mekboys direct the broad actions of the machine through a combination of manual levers, massive control wheels, and crude communication piping that pulse orders to lower crews. Some Imperial servitor transcripts refer to this as a command hub, though such nomenclature is strictly Imperial in origin and does not reflect Ork cultural terminology. Ork language fragments captured in intercepted radio traffic or picked feed audio suggest that the command hub's occupants do not pilot the Mega Gargant with fine precision. Instead, they issue broad directives, such as forward, smash, boom, shoot there, and subordinate Mekboys interpret these instructions and relay them to engine crews, weapons batteries, and secondary systems. Ork Weirdboys, when present, contribute to this process not through technical control, but through psychic resonance. While Mechanicus scholars debate the extent of this influence, some believe the psychic imprint of the Weirdboy can enhance crew coordination and contribute to a sense of unified action within the otherwise disparate system of mechanics and personnel. The internal layout of a Mega Gargant suggests that the crew complement is enormous relative to smaller Ork war machines. Archival records estimate crew numbers ranging from 100 to more than 400 Orks per machine, with additional Gretchen acting as ammunition handlers, boiler tenders, and general infantry support. These crew members are not functionally isolated within command lines as in human vehicles. Rather, they operate in a distributed and redundant manner, with each section of the Mega Gargant system supported by local crews. For example, engine banks are tended by mech crews stationed at platforms overlooking each combustion bank, while weapon emplacements have dedicated teams responsible for loading, aiming, and firing. The patchwork nature of these internal teams is reflected in the mechanical interconnectivity of the machine. Levers, ropes, wheels, and pulleys crisscross bulkheads, enabling multiple points of influence over a given system. This arrangement contributes to the perception that Mega Gargants are almost semi-autonomous organisms, where the sum of many actions produces coherent combat behaviour. Such impressions are supported by picked feeds, which often show weapons firing and engines roaring without any one individual physically at a centralised console. Instead, actions are taken by crews in their respective sections, each responding to propagated commands or local situational cues. Imperial xenologists have described this control paradigm as emergent rather than centralized, a form of coordination that functions effectively enough for Ork's strategic needs, but would be wholly untenable in the precision-driven vehicles of other factions. The purpose of a Mega Gargant in Ork warfare aligns with Ork's strategic doctrine at its broadest level, the projection of overwhelming force to achieve immediate battlefield dominance and to reinforce the cultural imperative of violent conquest. In the context of Ork military sociology, conflict is not merely a means to an objective, but a primary expression of existence and status. War bosses that command larger wars, war mobilizations, gain prestige, Mekboys whose creations smash hardest bring renown, and the sheer scale of a Mega Gargant becomes a cultural symbol of might unrivaled by standard Ork machines. Imperial historians have interpreted this as prestige engineering, where the sheer visibility and destructiveness of a Mega Gargant serves not only tactical objectives, but also the internal social hierarchy of Ork society. Operationally, Mega Gargants are deployed in scenarios where ordinary Ork war fleets and infantry formations lack the sheer destructive capacity to breach heavily fortified worlds, defend key strategic positions, or break stalemates against disciplined defenders. Mechanicus examination of battlefield logs indicates that Mega Gargants have been brought forward in campaigns against fortified Imperial hives, Xenos bastions, and even as mobile siege engines in engagements with Adeptus Mechanicus strongholds. In these contexts, the Mega Gargant's primary role is to apply sustained firepower and brute force pressure over extended periods, dissolving static defences and intimidating or overwhelming any organised resistance. One recorded battle in which Mega Gargants were deployed involved an extended engagement over the fortress world Braxus Prime. Imperial accounts describe multiple Mega Gargants advancing in line with wave after wave of Ork infantry and armoured vehicles. The Mega Gargants themselves moved slowly but inexorably, their colossal primary cannons unleashing barrages that levelled fortified bastions. Secondary turret arrays and energy-based discharge emitters accompanied the artillery barrages, while lateral rapid-fire batteries suppressed defensive infantry. This layered offensive contributed to a breakdown in the defenders' coordination and forced strategic withdrawals across several heavily fortified sectors. Though the defenders eventually halted the advance through the deployment of specialised void penetration ordnance and targeted strikes against the Mega Gargant's engine banks, the initial impact of the machines reshaped the battlefield environment decisively. Because Ork's strategic motivations differ significantly from those of other factions, the decision to deploy a Mega Gargant is seldom driven by long-term operational calculus. Instead, the presence of one or more Mega Gargants often signals a cultural escalation in the war, indicating that the Ork leadership perceives the conflict as worthy of investing considerable resources and manpower. Unlike Imperial forces, which might weigh logistical cost, long-term attrition, and strategic value before constructing and deploying a Titan, Orks judge the worthiness of an engagement by the scale of the violence itself. A Mega Gargant, then, is both a tool of war and a declaration. The battle matters on a scale that warrants the deployment of something unmatched in size and destructive capacity. The final fates of Mega Gargants vary, but they share several common endpoints documented in Imperial archives. No known Mega Gargant has survived intact through prolonged conflict to become a lasting fixture of any war zone. Rather, the record shows that these machines ultimately succumb to the very forces they are designed to overpower: environmental attrition or internal catastrophic failure. One frequently recorded scenario involves enemy tactical countermeasures designed to exploit the known structural weaknesses of Mega Gargants. While their thick, overlapping armour plating provides resilience against many conventional weapons, the seams and junctions, points where salvaged plating has been welded together, represent vulnerabilities subject to penetration by high-grade ordnance. Adeptus Astartes tactical detachments have recorded successful engagements where melter bomb squads infiltrated under cover of artillery barrages to place charges at key support struts. Once these critical supports were compromised, parts of the Mega Gargant superstructure collapsed under its own weight, rendering the machine immobile or catastrophically damaged. In other cases, targeted void laser bombardment from spaceborne defensive platforms has reduced Mega Gargants to burning wreckage. Imperial fleets operating in system defense roles have used coordinated energy strikes to sever engines, detonate onboard fuel reserves, or destroy weapon arrays. These assaults often occur over extended periods, with orbit-to-surface bombardment synchronized to maximize structural damage while minimizing collateral damage to surrounding populations. There are also documented instances where Mega Gargants have simply run out of operational viability due to internal failures or resource exhaustion. The hybrid fuels burned by these machines are improvised and inconsistent. During extended campaigns where resupply of fuel compounds and ammunition is disrupted, Mega Gargants slow to a halt. When immobilized, they become easier targets for enemy forces or self-destruct in chaotic fashion as internal engines overheat and fail. One Imperial picked feed, captured during the siege of Corvin Ridge, shows a Mega Gargant engulfed in fiery combustion, its crew evacuating through breached hull sections as ammunition stores detonated sequentially. Within hours, the once formidable machine lay in ruins, its massive frame twisted and smouldering across the plain. A smaller subset of Mega Gargants appear to have been abandoned rather than destroyed. In these cases, Ork crews withdrew under strategic necessity, leaving behind inert hulks that continue to emit residual heat and sporadic electrical discharges for years. Imperial exploration teams have encountered these abandoned wrecks, now catalogued as hazardous sites due to unstable fuel remnants and malfunctioning weapon systems that periodically fire randomly. The survival of these hulks in remote regions has spawned rumours among Mechanicus investigators about the potential reclamation or even reactivation of dormant engines, though no sanctioned operation has yet succeeded in restoring a Mega Gargant to functional status. Despite their eventual destruction or abandonment, Mega Gargants leave enduring tactical and psychological effects on the theatres in which they appear. Relief maps of former battlefields show massive crater fields and collapsed fortifications where Mega Gargants exerted their firepower. Post-battle reports from both Imperial and Xenos observers underscore the demoralizing effect these machines have on defenders, particularly when multiple Mega Gargants operate in concert. In several encounters, the appearance of a Mega Gargant on the horizon preceded the rapid dissolution of organized resistance, as defenders anticipated the overwhelming destructive capacity these machines brought to bear. From a strategic perspective, the deployment and subsequent demise of a Mega Gargant do not diminish the Ork perception of victory. Ork war leaders interpret both the devastation wrought and the eventual destruction of their Mega constructs as part of the narrative of war. The destruction of a Mega Gargant is often celebrated among Ork warbands as a testament to its power. Stories circulate within Ork encampments about how the machine smashed countless enemies before finally collapsing. Such cultural reaffirmation reinforces the Ork ethos that a war machine's ultimate value is measured not by its survival, but by the scale of destruction it inflicted while it stood. From the moment Imperial record keepers first took note of Mega Gargants in reports filed from multiple war zones, the Adeptus Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus approached the phenomenon through their respective institutional paradigms. These two pillars of the Imperium's bureaucratic and technical apparatus view the appearance of any new war machine, especially one of unprecedented scale and origin, through lenses shaped by centuries of doctrinal development, logistical rigor, and institutional memory. The Adeptus Administratum, responsible for the collation, classification, and preservation of Imperial records, encountered its first coherent reports of Mega Gargants indirectly. Field commanders operating on the peripheries of Imperial space, often on heavily contested agri-worlds or frontier systems, included in routine combat assessments references to colossal Ork constructs that defied comparison with established Ork emplacements such as transport gargants or looted artillery platforms. These early accounts were forwarded through regimental reporting channels and ultimately reached Administratum sensors tasked with categorizing battlefield phenomena for strategic analysis. Because the Administratum functions as the Imperium's archival backbone, its initial task was not to draw conclusions but to organize information, identifying temporal sequences, assigning identifiers, and correlating disparate encounters that might refer to the same type of machine encountered by multiple commanders across different systems. The emerging pattern in these reports indicated that Mega Gargants were not isolated curiosities, but recurring constructs appearing in multiple theatres where Ork war fleets engaged Imperial defences. Administratum scribes noted overlaps in descriptive parameters, massive size beyond typical Ork engineering, slow deliberate advance, overwhelming firepower, and unique propulsion signatures. These commonalities prompted the Administratum to issue special classification codes for these war machines, recognizing them as a distinct type of Ork construct requiring systematic documentation. Because the Administratum archives also serve as a cross-referencing mechanism across the Imperium, this early recognition ensured that future encounters, whether reported by Navy Intelligence, Planetary Defense Forces, or Mechanicus exploratory detachments, would feed into a centralized corpus of knowledge. Within the Administratum's internal memoranda, the emergence of Mega Gargants was discussed not merely as a matter of battlefield interest, but as a subject with potential implications for logistical forecasting and strategic planning. Even before detailed technical analyses were available, the recurring presence of these machines indicated that Ork engineering capacity at scale might be far greater than previously assessed. Because the Administrator must reconcile battlefield reality with resource allocation and strategic forecast models, the possibility that these machines could reflect a systemic shift in Ork warfighting capability triggered directives to gather higher resolution data. Field governors and planetary defense magistrates received special transponders and extended reporting orders to prioritize any sighting of Mega Gargants. Parallel to this bureaucratic momentum, the Adeptus Mechanicus adopted a markedly different frame of inquiry. Where the Administratum focused on documents and pattern recognition, Mechanicus Magos detachments sought material evidence and technical understanding. The Forge Worlds and research consoles of the Mechanicus had long maintained catalogues of Xenos machinery and speculative engineering treatises. The arrival of live pick feeds and physical wreckage from battlefields where Mega Gargants had been destroyed allowed Mechanicus analysts to begin the painstaking work of reverse engineering. Mechanicus field teams were dispatched to multiple wreck sites where Mega Gargants had been neutralized. These missions were dangerous, often requiring infiltration of contested battlefields strewn with Ork war debris and active hostile remnants. Once established, these detachments conducted structural examinations, thermal imaging scans, gravimetric analysis, and spectral assessments of residual power signatures. The primary objective was to determine how these machines were constructed, how they functioned, and what power systems enabled their mobility and weapon systems. Initial findings from these field expeditions revealed a startling degree of heterogeneity in Mega Gargant construction. Unlike Imperial Titans or Mechanicus-approved vehicles, which follow hyper-refined schematics and tightly controlled fabrication processes, Mega Gargants displayed no consistent engineering blueprint. Instead, each machine appeared to be a singular construct assembled from whatever materials were available in the region where it was built. Salvaged warship hull plating, industrial drive engines, looted generator cores, and even repurposed planetary mining equipment were integrated in patterns that defied traditional engineering protocols. Mechanicus analysts recorded these observations in field reports that repeatedly stressed the absence of standardization. The absence of standardization had both expected and unexpected implications. On the one hand, it made categorization and modeling more complex. Analysts could not rely on a fixed template to identify structural weaknesses or component synergies. On the other hand, it provided the Mechanicus with a unique opportunity to observe an alternative engineering paradigm, one rooted in Ork cultural imperatives rather than precision fabrication standards. This paradigm, Mechanicus records note, is functional rather than efficient. Each Mega Gargant is constructed to accomplish specific war-making tasks as defined by the Ork warband that conceived it, rather than to meet design parameters defined by performance models. Technically speaking, One of the most intriguing analytical threads concerned power generation and distribution systems. Mechanicus scans of destroyed Mega Gargants, correlated with residual thermal signatures captured via long-range sensors, confirmed that these war machines do not rely on Xenos exotic reactors such as Dark Mechanicus cores or human standard-issue ceramite fusion generators. Instead, they employ massive internal combustion arrays, cobbled together from multiple engine banks of varying origins. These engines burn hybrid fuels, some refined from looted petroleum reserves, others synthesized from volatile organochemical compounds of Ork origin. The fuels themselves vary from world to world, often dependent on what resources the local warband could scavenge or synthesize. Mechanicus reports emphasize that while the exact chemical composition of these propellants remains poorly understood, their energy density is sufficient to sustain prolonged operation of Mega Gargant engines at moderate output levels. Thermal emission curves derived from picked feeds show that these machines operate in a high-heat, high-stress regime, with engine temperatures far exceeding those tolerated by typical Imperial vehicles. This operational profile suggests that Ork engineers do not prioritize longevity or fuel efficiency. Instead, their designs assume continuous consumption and frequent resupply, a model that dovetails with the Ork logistical ecosystem, where fuel depots, scavenged reserves, and on-the-spot improvisation replenish supplies. Administratum economists and logistics analysts interpreted this engine behavior in a broader context of Ork supply chain patterns. Whereas Imperial forces maintain meticulously planned fuel reserves, supply lines, and resupply schedules, Ork logistics are decentralized, opportunistic, and dependent on battlefield scavenging. The impact on Mega Gargant operations is significant. These machines often begin campaigns with minimal dedicated fuel reserves, relying instead on the presence of nearby resource caches, wrecked starships, or industrial storage facilities to maintain operational capacity. Administratum analysts flag this as a critical vulnerability, not because it reduces the machine's immediate combat effectiveness, which remains formidable, but because it creates observable patterns in campaign progression. Mega Gargant deployment tends to cluster around high-resource regions where fuel and scavenged materials are abundant. Another major subject of analysis for both the Administratum and the Mechanicus was the crew and command structure within Mega Gargants. Imperial records from interrogations of captured Ork crewmen, always an imperfect but invaluable source of insight, indicated that command is distributed among multiple Mekboys, artillery crews, and attendant Ork infantry operating within the machine. Mechanicus anthropologists noted that this decentralized control structure parallels the mechanical decentralization observed in the construction itself. Rather than a centralized control nexus akin to an Imperial pilot chamber, the Mega Gargant's internal command network consists of overlapping control stations, each responsible for subsets of the machine's functions. Mechanicus cognitive analysts correlated this with battlefield performance data. Pick feed sequences show that even when significant sections of a Mega Gargant are damaged, other systems within the machine often continue to operate independently. For example, when a forward artillery battery is destroyed, lateral secondary turrets may continue firing, engines may maintain propulsion, and crew members in other compartments will attempt to compensate for lost functions. This behavior suggests that redundancy is built into both the physical structure and operational logic of the machine. Administratum strategists interpreted this as a form of operational resilience, albeit one rooted in improvisation rather than optimized engineering. Distance scanning and post-engagement mapping also contributed to logistical findings concerning movement patterns and supply footprints. Mega Gargants, due to their weight and propulsion systems, move slowly, often no more than a few kilometers per hour on flat terrain. Territory control maps from contested systems show predictable routes taken by these machines as they advance. Importantly, these routes often correlate with areas of resource extraction or salvage potential, since Mega Gargants, like all Ork war machines, require regular inputs of material supplies for maintenance and resupply. Administratum analysts leverage these correlations to predict likely paths of advance and to advise Imperial commanders on defensive positioning. Mechanicus experts supplemented these logistical insights with wear and tear models derived from spectral analysis of wreckage and thermal degradation profiles. They found that Mega Gargants exhibit unusually rapid structural fatigue and key mechanical linkages when operated at sustained high output. This fatigue profile, combined with the inconsistency of materials used in construction, helps explain why few Mega Gargants remain operational beyond singular campaigns. Rather than possessing durable longevity, these machines tend to deteriorate quickly under prolonged stress, a finding confirmed by distelemetric reconstruction of several ruptured engine banks and fractured support struts in examined wrecks. Administratum Economic reports further integrated these technical findings into a broader understanding of Ork War economics. The rapid wear of Mega Gargants, their enormous consumption of fuel and ammunition, and their dependence on opportunistic resource acquisition suggest that Ork's strategy does not attempt to preserve these machines as long-term assets. Instead, they are functioning artifacts of a volatile and episodic warfare paradigm. Administratum scribes concluded that Mega Gargants serve more as momentary force multipliers than as sustainable public war investments. This conclusion aligns with post-battle assessments, noting that Ork warbands typically accumulate more Mega Gargants in periods of high resource availability and abandon them when local supply conditions deteriorate. Mechanicus analysts also explored sensor and targeting systems employed within Mega Gargants. Their investigations revealed an array of optic lenses, crude sensor masts, and manually operated visual assemblies rather than advanced electronic or electro-optic targeting arrays. Mechanicus records emphasize that these systems function adequately at short to intermediate range, but lack precision and stabilization found in Imperial vehicles. The absence of advanced computational targeting suggests that Mega Gargants rely heavily on brute force rather than accuracy, a conclusion supported by comparative evaluations of firing patterns in picked feeds, which show broad area saturation rather than pinpoint strikes. Taken together, the combined findings of the Adeptus Administratum and the Adeptus Mechanicus paint a picture of Mega Gargants as logistic anomalies, imposing, destructive, and complex, yet constructed outside the normative engineering frameworks understood by the Imperium. Administratum sources bring context to the patterns and implications of their appearances, while Mechanicus analyses provide technical grounding in how these machines function, fail, and interact with their environments. The synergy of these institutional perspectives provides a comprehensive foundation for understanding Mega Gargants not simply as war engines, but as phenomena with implications for supply, strategy, and cross-factional engineering knowledge. Imperial records first note the consistent deployment of Mega Gargants during frontier conflicts in the southern sectors of Segmentum Obscurus. Engagements recorded across multiple systems indicate that Ork warlords increasingly incorporated these massive constructs into their front lines where conventional Ork engines or infantry would have struggled to achieve decisive results. Early Administratum reports from Millennia 41, Year 120, describe an Ork invasion of the agri-world Thassel Prime, in which a single Mega Gargant spearheaded a coordinated assault on multiple planetary fortifications. The picked feeds captured during this engagement show the Mega Gargant advancing through dense urban terrain, deliberately levelling fortified structures with repeated cannon barrages, while secondary weapon batteries suppressed planetary defence teams. Mechanicus analysts, upon reviewing the Thassel Prime engagements, noted that Mega Gargants demonstrated a distinctive fighting style that combined direct assault with a layered application of ranged and close-quarters firepower. The primary cannons, often mounted in forward turrets, delivered devastating kinetic impacts on fortifications, while lateral and dorsal arrays provided overlapping coverage of surrounding areas, suppressing both infantry and light vehicles. Observed patterns suggest that Ork crews operate under a loosely coordinated approach in which redundancy in weapons deployment compensates for lack of precise fire control. Secondary turrets appear to fire independently, but with timing that produces effective area saturation. Mechanicus reports infer that this approach is not premeditated in the tactical sense, but is instead a natural consequence of the distributed crew system and the emergent behaviour of Ork command hubs. Another significant engagement occurred in Millennia 41, year 127, during the Siege of Braxus Prime, where multiple Mega Gargants were deployed in tandem. Pict feed reconstructions indicate that the Orks positioned the Mega Gargants in advance of infantry and transport Gargants, using them as both mobile artillery fortresses and as intimidation tools. Administratum observers noted that the psychological impact on defenders was substantial. Planetary Garrison reports describe mass panic among both conscripted militia and regular forces, particularly when Mega Gargants advanced with accompanying heavy bombardments. The siege documentation records numerous cases in which entire defensive positions collapsed after the first wave of Mega Gargants breached outer fortifications, a pattern that aligns with broader Ork doctrines emphasizing shock, violence, and overwhelming presence over precision. Analysis of weapon utilization patterns reveals that Mega Gargants employ combined arms tactics inherently, rather than intentionally. The forward cannon batteries provide long-range destructive capacity, lateral projectile batteries deliver suppressive fire, and energy emitters or plasma arrays inflict area-level attrition. In close proximity to enemy fortifications, mechanized melee implements, rams, saw blades, and reinforced striking arms engage destructively. These close-quarters operations are rarely observed in isolation. Instead, they complement ranged attacks by delivering physical damage after softening the enemy's structural and defensive systems. Mechanicus reports emphasize that this multi-tiered approach appears almost instinctual, emerging from the interplay between crew redundancy, weapon placement, and Ork improvisation rather than from strategic pre-planning. During the Second Battle of Vador Hive, dated Millennia 41, year 130, Imperial reports document an engagement where a Mega Gargant sustained heavy bombardment from long-range artillery. Despite multiple breaches in armour and the partial destruction of secondary weapons, the machine continued forward, firing residual artillery and sustaining pressure on defenders. Observers describe the fighting style as relentless and attritional. Rather than retreating when damaged, Mega Gargants tend to maintain forward momentum, which increases their exposure but also maximizes the pressure exerted on enemy formations. Administratum analysts noted that Ork command philosophy appears to prioritize continuous aggression and the demonstration of force, reflecting the cultural impetus to dominate and shock opponents. Pict feed sequences from these battles indicate that Mega Gargants often operate in staggered formations, with one or two units leading and others following at measured intervals. This distribution minimizes the risk of concentrated counterfire eliminating multiple units simultaneously, while allowing overlapping fields of fire. Mechanicus field notes suggest that these formations may also arise from logistical constraints. Ork crews require access to fuel dumps, scavenged ammunition, and terrain amenable to the Mega Gargant's tracked propulsion systems. The pace of advance is dictated as much by these logistical considerations as by direct tactical intent, creating a feedback loop where strategic choices and physical limitations intersect. Several encounters also provide insight into the interaction of Mega Gargants with planetary environments. On heavily forested or cratered worlds, Pict feeds show that Orks either partially dismantle or adapt portions of the Mega Gargant superstructure to traverse obstacles, using improvised ramps or temporary bridges constructed from wreckage. Administratum observers note that such adaptations underscore the Orks' pragmatic approach to engineering. Battlefield exigencies dictate modifications on the fly, rather than adherence to pre-existing design templates. In desert or open plain scenarios, by contrast, Mega Gargants can advance at near-optimal pace, maximizing the utility of primary weapon arrays and reducing risks of entrapment or immobilization. Ork battle doctrine also emphasizes psychological warfare facilitated by Mega Gargants. Reports indicate that defenders frequently overestimate the number and capabilities of these machines, sometimes attributing multiple attacks to a single Mega Gargant due to the wide area affected by their firepower and accompanying infantry. Administratum analysts have classified this phenomenon as force amplification through perception, where the visual and destructive presence of a Mega Gargant exaggerates its perceived operational footprint. Such effects align with broader Ork strategic imperatives, where terror, confusion, and the display of overwhelming might are equally as important as tactical outcomes. Recorded engagements consistently indicate a survivorship bias in operational effectiveness. Mega Gargants rarely survive prolonged campaigns intact, but those that do contribute significantly to Ork objectives. In multiple post-battle pick feed reviews, analysts observe that even when partially destroyed or immobilized, Mega Gargants can maintain suppressive capabilities through residual weapon systems. Administratum reports underscore that such persistence allows Orks to consolidate territorial gains, create diversionary fire for infantry operations, and maintain pressure on defending forces long after initial breaches. Speculative interpretations by some Mechanicus scholars propose that battlefield adaptability may be a defining characteristic of Mega Gargants. Unlike Imperial constructs, which rely on pre-programmed tactical doctrine and structured command, Ork crews adjust weapon deployment, movement vectors, and internal crew focus dynamically. While these interpretations remain unconfirmed, picked feed patterns suggest that the distributed crew system allows for decentralized decision-making that, combined with redundant weapon systems, produces a functional combat adaptability unique among war machines of comparable size. A particularly notable example of such adaptability occurred during the Siege of Corvin Ridge, where Mega Gargants encountered a combination of defensive emplacements, anti-armor artillery, and natural obstacles. Despite significant damage to forward turrets and partial destruction of track segments, Ork crews redistributed manpower, manually repaired propulsion systems, and continued their advance. Picked feed reconstructions show lateral turrets maintaining fire while forward cannons were offline, highlighting the intrinsic redundancy embedded in Mega Gargant design. Administratum notes from this campaign emphasize that these improvised repairs and operational adjustments significantly increase battlefield longevity, although they remain contingent upon crew resilience and available resources. Collectively, these observations establish Mega Gargants as primary offensive anchors in Ork engagements. They are neither precision machines nor particularly agile, yet their effectiveness derives from scale, redundancy, psychological impact, and emergent combat behavior. Administratum reports quantify the strategic outcome. Planetary defenses often suffer disproportionate attrition when confronted with one or more Mega Gargants, particularly when these machines are supported by conventional Ork infantry, looted vehicles, and artillery batteries. Mechanicus post-battle analyses further emphasize that Mega Gargants' resilience under fire is matched by their propensity for mechanical failure under sustained engagement. Field reports indicate that critical failures, typically in engine banks, track supports, or structural joints, can occur without warning, abruptly halting operations. Administratum observers note that while the destructive output prior to failure is significant, logistical vulnerabilities are intrinsic to their operational paradigm. This duality underscores the principle that Mega Gargants are both formidable offensive tools and inherently transient assets in the Ork war apparatus. The operational record of Mega Gargants extends beyond the widely documented campaigns of Thassel Prime, Braxis Prime, and Corvin Ridge. Administratum filings and Mechanicus expedition reports reveal further appearances across multiple war zones, each contributing incremental knowledge of the machine's capabilities, limitations, and broader strategic impact. These additional engagements provide a fuller understanding of Mega Gargants not only as war machines, but also as indicators of Ork technological evolution, logistical strategy, and battlefield behavior. Millennia 41, year 132, marks the documented deployment of Mega Gargants during the Ork incursion on the industrial world of Vador Hive system. Imperial intelligence intercepted Ork communications indicating that the warlords had assembled 3 Mega Gargants to spearhead an assault on the Hive's central manufactorum. Picked feed recordings show the machines advancing in a coordinated formation across heavily built-up zones. Administratum observers noted that despite the confined urban environment, Mega Gargants maintained relative stability, crushing fortifications and infrastructure while lateral weapons suppressed defensive infantry. Mechanicus analysis identifies this as evidence of the Ork's ability to adapt the scale and mass of Mega Gargants to constrained operational spaces, although they remain vulnerable to structural bottlenecks and uneven terrain. Additional accounts suggest that Mega Gargants participated in the Battle of Cernus Expanse, a largely open-terrain conflict occurring in Millennia 41, year 134. Multiple units were deployed simultaneously, and picked feed sequences indicate overlapping fields of fire that maximised area destruction while providing mutual coverage against mechanised counterattacks. Administratum Logistics reports underscore that such large-scale deployment requires substantial preparatory efforts. Ork crews relied on opportunistic fuel and ammunition harvesting along the route of advance. Though precise operational logistics remain opaque, the Administratum inferred that resource accumulation for multiple Mega Gargants constitutes a significant coordination task, likely involving both scavenged materials and pre-existing depots captured during prior skirmishes. Mechanicus evaluations of Cernus Expanse engagements further elaborate on structural wear patterns observed in the field. Even when no immediate damage is inflicted by enemy fire, Mega Gargants exhibit progressive stress accumulation along track assemblies and major support struts. Picked feed observations correlate these stress points with incidents of partial collapse or abrupt immobilization in subsequent operations. Mechanicus engineers emphasize that these failures are often mitigated temporarily by the improvisational skills of the onboard mech crews, who redistribute mechanical loads, reinforce critical joints with salvaged materials, or manually manipulate propulsion and steering systems. Administratum analysts classify such interventions as operational resilience derived from cultural improvisation rather than formal engineering. The aftermath of Mega Gargant deployments consistently demonstrates a dual impact on theatres of conflict. First, the physical devastation inflicted is unparalleled in conventional Ork operations. Surface surveys post-engagement reveal extensive crater fields, collapsed fortifications, and the widespread destruction of industrial infrastructure. Administratum reports quantify losses, noting that planetary production capacities may be disrupted for decades following the passage of a Mega Gargant. Second, there is a pronounced psychological and socio-political effect. Civilian populations and defending forces frequently suffer disorientation, panic, and demoralization, which can contribute to rapid capitulation of defensive forces or the abandonment of strategic positions. Mechanicus records, cross-referenced with picked feed analysis, corroborate these effects as a consistent tactical advantage exploited by Ork commanders. In multiple campaigns, Mega Gargants were eventually neutralized by combined arms approaches integrating concentrated artillery, targeted sabotage, or precision strikes. Administratum war records from the Siege of Corvin Ridge and the Thassel Prime engagements indicate that while Mega Gargants can endure significant punishment, they are ultimately transient assets, often destroyed or abandoned after a single operational deployment. Mechanicus analyses attribute this to several compounding factors: the irregularity of construction materials, variable quality control by mech crews, high thermal and mechanical stress during operations, and reliance on localized resource acquisition for continued mobility. This assessment aligns with Administratum interpretations emphasizing the ephemeral nature of Ork engineering on this scale, which prioritizes immediate battlefield effect over sustainability. The final analysis from the Adeptus Mechanicus perspective positions Mega Gargants as a unique case study in Xenos engineering. While lacking the precision, reliability, and standardized schematics of Imperial war machines, these Ork constructs demonstrate functional ingenuity. The Mechanicus identifies three primary points of interest. First, the distributed crew and redundant command system, which permits continued operation even under significant damage. Second, the improvisational adaptability to environmental constraints, including urban, desert, and cratered terrains. And third, the emergent coordination of weapon systems resulting in effective, if unpredictable, combat behavior. While no single Mega Gargant survives prolonged campaigns intact, the Mechanicus posits that understanding their operational paradigms offers valuable insight into non-human design logic and emergent control structures, potentially informing comparative studies for Imperial engineers exploring decentralized or robust failsafe architectures. From the Adeptus Administratum perspective, the recurring deployment of Mega Gargants highlights patterns of Ork strategic behavior and resource utilization. Administratum analysts note that Mega Gargants appear in theaters where Orks can leverage abundant materials for construction and operational maintenance, suggesting a form of resource-driven prioritization. These engagements also provide insight into the temporal pacing of Ork campaigns. Mega Gargants appear early in offensives to maximize shock value, then decline in influence as attrition, logistical constraints, and mechanical failure accumulate. The Administratum treats this data as a foundation for predictive modeling of Ork invasion behavior, correlating machine presence with likely routes, resupply requirements, and eventual battlefield outcomes. Post-battle reports further illuminate interaction with Ork social hierarchy. Administratum documents compiled from interrogated crew testimony and picked feed analysis indicate that the construction and deployment of a Mega Gargant are acts of prestige for warbosses and Mekboy teams. Successful operation and destruction of enemy forces enhance internal status, whereas loss or destruction may result in punitive reprisals within Ork hierarchies. Mechanicus studies corroborate this observation, noting that the machine's scale and destructive output serve not only tactical objectives, but also cultural signaling functions, an aspect that the Administratum has integrated into its broader models of Ork behavior. Finally, combining both perspectives allows for a composite understanding of Mega Gargants. They are simultaneously powerful, ephemeral, and socially significant constructs. Mechanically, they are large-scale, distributed systems capable of sustained combat operations under chaotic conditions. Administratively, their presence offers predictive value regarding Ork supply logistics, resource exploitation, and campaign sequencing. While their engineering lacks refinement by Imperial standards, their operational impact across multiple campaigns demonstrates the effectiveness of Ork improvisation and cultural motivation in driving battlefield outcomes. The final assessments from both Adeptus Mechanicus and Administratum archives conclude that Mega Gargants represent a high-risk, high-reward strategy, functioning as both instruments of war and markers of Xenos innovation. Their study remains a priority for Imperial analysts, both for tactical preparation and for broader understanding of emergent war machine paradigms outside Imperial norms. In Imperial records, the Inquisition's interest in Mega Gargants emerges not from a technical appraisal of engineering, as with the Adeptus Mechanicus, nor from logistical patterning, as with the Adeptus Administratum, but from the intersection of Xenos behavior, anomalous phenomena, and potential existential threat. Inquisitorial dossiers regarding Mega Gargants are classified and fragmented, with many sealed under Level 3 and Level 5 edicts due to content considered disruptive or unlikely to be comprehensible within standard strategic paradigms. Declassified summaries, however, provide insight into the Inquisition's impressions, observational data, and the phenomena they have deemed difficult to reconcile with current Imperial frameworks of causality, behavior, and ordinality. From the standpoint of Inquisition field operatives, Mega Gargants first registered as a recurring aberration pattern rather than a singular engineering event. Unlike anomalies tied to demonology, warp incursions, or corrupted artifacts, Mega Gargants made their appearance across multiple systems within chaotic war zones, where Ork warbands were active. In practical terms, Inquisitorial agents observed that these enormous constructs seemed to transcend expected limits of Ork construction capability, prompting questions about the nature of Ork cognition, group psychodynamics, and the influence of collective psychic resonance on material assemblage. Inquisition memos contain numerous references to what agents term a chronometric dissonance associated with Mega Gargants. In practical field reports, this was described as inconsistency between temporal signatures of construction and the expected time required to build machines of such scale. Standard Imperial war machines, be they Titans of the Legio Titanica or Mechanicus Dreadnought constructs, require detailed schematics, precise material allotments, and tightly regulated build sequences that consume predictable spans of time. In contrast, Inquisition tracking of Ork warp route intercepts and planetary surveillance footage reveals instances where a Mega Gargant appears fully assembled within timeframes too brief to align with any known large-scale fabrication process. Inquisitorial analysts note that this effect persists even after accounting for Ork psychic surges and the associated amplification of mechanical cohesion within Ork war machines. This observation remains unverified in mechanistic terms, but is documented consistently across multiple engagements, leading some Inquisition thinkers to label it a temporal or causative anomaly rather than mere engineering expediency. Equally perplexing to inquisitorial researchers is the psychic signature footprint left in the wake of Mega Gargant deployments. Field investigations accompanied by sanctioned astropathic monitoring have recorded residual psychic turbulence that does not align with typical Ork Gestalt emissions. Ordinarily, large concentrations of Orks, particularly during a war, produce a distinctly chaotic psychic resonance traceable through astropathic nodes. Such signatures are volatile, fluctuating with the emotional and violent intensity of Ork mobs and dissipating rapidly once the conflict subsides. Mega Gargant-associated signatures, by contrast, extend long after the cessation of hostilities. Inquisitorial sensory logs note persistent low-frequency psychic harmonics that linger within affected regions for weeks to months post-battle. These harmonics do not correspond to warp echoes typical of demon incursions, nor do they align with the patterns attributed to standard template construct ghosts or machine spirits. Instead, Inquisition investigators characterized them as a psychological imprint, a residual effect of mass violence and disruptive engineering on the collective unconscious of both Xenos and material environments. Some Inquisition theorists refer to this phenomenon as continuum reverberation, a term indicating the possibility that Mega Gargant activities leave discontinuous effects on the spacetime fabric or psychic strata in ways not yet fully understood. Though unproven and speculative, these findings have been noted in multiple sealed files. Inquisitorial observations also extend to unexpected behavioral interactions between Mega Gargants and other war machine classes. During combined theatre operations where Imperial Titans, Chaos War engines, or Necron constructs encountered Mega Gargants, field records indicate that enemy behaviour sometimes diverged from expected tactical logic. For example, in engagements involving Necron tomb worlds, Mega Gargants have been observed operating in ways that triggered atypical Necron responses, including phased repositioning and disengagement routines rarely recorded against other non-Necron war machines. Inquisition analysts caution that while the cause of such interactions remains unconfirmed, the consistency of these patterns suggests that Mega Gargants may influence opponent AI frameworks, primal instinctive response matrices, or environmental threat prioritization systems in ways that are not currently understood. Another area of Inquisition scrutiny involves unexplained survivability phenomena associated with certain Mega Gargants. In multiple battlefields where these machines were presumed destroyed, Inquisitorial scouts later documented residual heat signatures, sporadic weapon discharges, or sporadic track movement within wreckage fields long after the main conflict had ended. Mechanicus forensics partially concur with this observation, identifying unstable energy cells and residual combustion reactions. But Inquisition files contain notations suggesting that the degree and persistence of these occurrences exceed what would be expected from conventional combustion residues or thermal momentum. One particularly unsettling Inquisition report describes a scenario in which a Mega Gargant wreck near the Ren-Var expanse emitted sporadic blasts over a period of nearly 3 standard weeks following the primary engagement. During this period, astropathic monitoring units recorded fluctuating psychic feedback, aligning with the intermittent weapon discharges. Inquisitorial operatives described the effect as a correlation of anthropic violence with machine instability, noting that the residual phenomena did not conform to any known pattern of self-ignition, ammunition cook-off events, or structural collapse dynamics. The Mechanicus description for similar occurrences typically attributed them to unstable fuel residues or delayed reaction chains within weapon systems. The Inquisition conceded this explanation, but appended a note to the effect that these phenomena may have secondary psychosomatic influences on bystanders, including increased aggression, nightmarish dream patterns, or disproportionate fear responses, effects consistent with prolonged exposure to aberrant psychic harmonics. In parallel, the Ork belief system itself has drawn inquisitorial interpretation. Xenopsychological assessments suggest that Ork cultural reverence for Gork and Mork, the dual aspects of brutal strength and cunning brutality, may not merely be mythic metaphor but could constitute a pseudo-cognitive reinforcing field that influences material cohesion. Observations of Mega Gargant construction sites reveal that Mekboys and boys engaged in ritualistic chanting, rhythmic pounding on armor plates, and collective screaming prior to major structural integrations. While the Mechanicus classifies these acts as cultural behavior, with negligible engineering function, Inquisition reports consider the possibility that collective psychosomatic states among Ork builders and crew could exert an influence on material outcomes at scales not currently describable by standard physics. This remains highly speculative, untested, and not sanctioned as formal doctrine, but the consistency of ritualistic patterns surrounding Mega Gargant activity raises questions about whether living belief systems can interact with material construction processes in ways that blur the line between psychosocial action and physical causative efficacy. Another unexplainable finding noted by inquisitorial archivists is the apparent resilience of Mega Gargants to certain antimatter and void phase energies. During the siege of Castellum Ishvara, tactical recordings show that void phase torpedoes, typically effective against heavily armoured targets by creating localised phase instability, failed to disintegrate a Mega Gargant's primary structure, instead leaving behind areas of intense ionization and rapid reformation of structural bulkheads. Mechanicus forensics attribute this partially to the machine's layered, irregular plating, which disrupts phase resonance penetration. However, inquisitorial analysis posits an additional inconsistency, a specific pattern of ion flux that does not align with any recorded interaction between void energy and non-warp materials. This anomaly was noted in sealed Inquisition files and regarded as sufficiently anomalous to warrant continued surveillance. The Inquisition also documents numerous cases in which Mega Gargants appear to exert influence on local warp stability. In regions surrounding prolonged Mega Gargant engagements, astropathic readings and warp resonance monitors often registered fluctuations inconsistent with normal spatial warp equilibrium. In some cases, these readings included brief fracture patterns, transient and localized distortions in warp alignment that decay rapidly but register as measurable anomalies. The Mechanicus generally interprets these as secondary effects of massive physical violence and the excitation of environmental substrates. The Inquisition, operating from a more skeptical vantage, considers whether Mega Gargants, by virtue of their scale, distributed psychic footprint, or the unique physiological composition of Ork collectives, may catalyze conditions that interact with the Empyrean in unforeseen ways. Across all sanctioned Inquisition records, a consistent theme emerges. Mega Gargants are not merely large war machines. They are focal points for phenomena that intersect material, psychic, environmental, and behavioral domains in ways that challenge singular explanatory frameworks. Unlike demon engines, which are tied to warp corruption and demonic agency, or corrupted tech primes, which display recognizable patterns of degenerative malfunction, Mega Gargants occupy a category that resists easy classification. Inquisitorial impressions underscore that these machines, while fundamentally physical constructs, exhibit emergent properties, temporal anomalies, persistent psychic harmonics, interaction effects on enemy AI or behavior, and environmental warp fluctuations that invite further investigation. For the Inquisition, these findings are significant not only because they present anomalies, but also because they raise broader questions about the nature of causality when dealing with Xenos constructs assembled through cultural impetus, collective psychosocial dynamics, and improvised engineering processes. To Inquisitors concerned with potential threats to the Imperium's stability, such phenomena warrant ongoing observation, interdisciplinary review, alongside Mechanicus expertise and cautious categorization pending further empirical data. In the compiled records of the Ork campaigns, inquisitorial observations identify repeated anomalous phenomena that occur during and after Mega Gargant engagements. Unlike conventional Ork machinery, Mega Gargants consistently display behaviors and operational outcomes that deviate from expected physical or tactical norms. Field notes from multiple campaigns, though partially redacted in sealed files, indicate that these anomalies are both widespread and persistent, often defying conventional Mechanicus analysis and challenging Imperial predictive models. One of the most frequently documented anomalies concerns apparent self-preservation and autonomous decision-making within the Mega Gargants. Standard Imperial engineering paradigms anticipate that war machines require continuous human or AI input to maintain operational cohesion. Mega Gargants, by contrast, exhibit emergent behavioral patterns in which damaged units continue their advance or adjust their weapon output without apparent guidance from mech crews. Sealed Inquisition reports from the Siege of Xyros Prime detail an instance in which 2 Mega Gargants, partially immobilized by bombardment, reorganized their firing sequences and coordinated lateral movements to maintain suppressive coverage. Observers noted that this occurred despite the apparent incapacitation of the majority of onboard crew, suggesting that redundancy in Ork crew systems may operate in combination with an unquantified emergent phenomenon, possibly influenced by collective psychosocial or psychic factors. The Mechanicus, while acknowledging mechanical redundancy, cannot fully account for the apparent decision hierarchy and adaptive coordination observed. Further anomalies were recorded during the Third Battle of Brontis IV, a high-intensity engagement in which Mega Gargants encountered heavily fortified planetary defences. Pict feed reconstructions and astropathic surveillance reveal that some units displayed unexpected resilience to energy weapon discharges. Plasma and thermal lance impacts produced localized structural damage, yet subsequent observations show partial spontaneous realignment of armor panels and a temporary restoration of primary weapon functionality. Mechanicus forensics interpret partial physical rearrangement as consistent with Ork improvisational repair during combat. However, Inquisition notes mark this as unusual, emphasizing the speed and scale of the repair, which exceeds what would be expected from manual mechanical intervention in combat conditions. Sealed reports speculate that collective Ork belief, combined with Wi-induced psychic fields, may play a role in facilitating such rapid operational restoration. Documented encounters also highlight temporal inconsistencies in Mega Gargant operations. During the skirmish of Talvar Crater, observers noted a single Mega Gargant engaged multiple defensive positions simultaneously, creating the perception of duplicated operational activity. Field analysts and later Inquisition investigators suggest that the anomaly might result from Pict feed distortion or misaligned temporal signals within astropathic monitoring networks. Nonetheless, multiple independent recordings corroborate the event, and the Inquisition has labelled the phenomenon chronometric displacement, indicating that Mega Gargant movements occasionally appear to operate outside standard temporal expectations. The Mechanicus remains unable to reconcile these observations with known mechanical or physical models, leaving the event categorized as unexplained but recurrent. Sealed Inquisition dossiers also describe environmental manipulation associated with Mega Gargants. During planetary assaults, localized weather disturbances, sudden shifts in atmospheric pressure, and anomalous seismic activity have been recorded in regions surrounding Mega Gargant paths. In some instances, these phenomena were severe enough to affect both Imperial and Ork forces. For example, on the agri-world Ravix Prime, reconnaissance logs note that dust storms, unnatural vibrations, and minor tectonic disruptions coincided precisely with the Mega Gargant advance, creating significant impediments to defending formations while simultaneously enhancing the machine's shock effect. Administratum reports consider these outcomes primarily incidental, while the Inquisition suggests that the scale and predictability of the phenomena may indicate indirect environmental influence, potentially arising from the combination of mass kinetic energy, psychic resonance, and the intrinsic physical irregularities of Ork engineering. Mega Gargants also demonstrate unpredictable interactions with other war engines, as documented in multiple encounters with Imperial Titans, Chaos war machines, and even Necron constructs. During the engagement at Korriban Ridge, a Mega Gargant and a pair of Imperial Reaver Titans entered overlapping firing zones. Field reports indicate that the Mega Gargant absorbed repeated volleys that would typically disable an equivalently sized Imperial war machine. Sealed files suggest that the structural irregularities and distributed energy networks within the Mega Gargant may redirect or partially dissipate incoming energy, though precise mechanisms remain undetermined. The Inquisition noted that similar observations occurred in engagements with Necron monoliths, where the Ork machine's unpredictable impact on enemy tactical responses hints at emergent behavioural effects extending beyond mere physical destruction. Another recurring anomaly involves weapon and ammunition behaviours. In several documented battles, Mega Gargants fired ordnance that, while visually conventional, produced outcomes inconsistent with expected trajectories and destructive potential. For instance, during the Battle of Thaler Void, projectiles occasionally deviated from predicted paths, impacting multiple unintended targets with heightened kinetic force. Administratum analysts attribute this partially to Ork improvisation and lack of standardized aiming systems, but Inquisition files suggest that the consistency of these deviations may imply a latent, non-standard energy influence, or a resonance effect tied to collective Ork willpower or psychic amplification. These phenomena remain unverified, but are noted repeatedly across campaigns. Sealed Inquisition records highlight the persistent post-battle anomalies of Mega Gargants. Even after units were presumed destroyed, residual energy emissions, sporadic weapon discharges, and partial mobility were documented within wreckage zones. During the aftermath survey of Corvin Ridge, for example, an ostensibly destroyed Mega Gargant exhibited intermittent cannon fire and localized magnetic field fluctuations over several standard days. Astropathic reports simultaneously detected faint psychic emissions correlating with the residual mechanical activity, while Mechanicus post-mortem analysis attributed some effects to unstable energy cells and structural collapse. Inquisitorial notes indicate that the combination of mechanical and psychic persistence is atypical and may represent a phenomenon not currently classified within known scientific paradigms. Finally, multiple sealed reports emphasize cultural and ritualistic contributions to these anomalies. Observers noted that Mega Gargant operations often coincide with ceremonial activity among Ork crews, including rhythmic hammering, chanting, and coordinated shouts. While Mechanicus forensics consider these activities symbolic or coincidental, Inquisition analysts theorize that Ork psychosocial energy may materially interact with Mega Gargant functions, potentially influencing resilience, weapon output, or emergent operational behaviors. Although this remains speculative and is not recognized as formal causative evidence, the consistency of these observations across separate campaigns suggests a correlation worthy of continued study. Across these encounters and anomalies, the Inquisition concludes that Mega Gargants occupy a unique category of Xenos construct. They are simultaneously physical war machines, focal points for emergent phenomena, and conduits for collective psychosocial or psychic influences. While Mechanicus analysis provides insight into construction and operational mechanics, the anomalies documented by inquisitorial observation suggest a broader pattern of unpredictable effects that challenge traditional classification. Sealed reports repeatedly emphasize caution in engagement, recommending both strategic containment and ongoing surveillance, as these constructs consistently demonstrate behaviors that cannot be fully anticipated or modeled within standard Imperial frameworks. The final assessment of Mega Gargants within inquisitorial archives remains heavily qualified by the classification of supporting documentation. A significant portion of field reports, picked feed reconstructions, and astropathic logs are restricted under Level 3 to Level 5 edicts, reflecting the Inquisition's determination that knowledge of these constructs has the potential to disrupt standard operational doctrine or induce panic among less informed Imperial sectors. Despite these restrictions, declassified synopses and cross-referenced observational data provide sufficient material to outline both operational patterns and anomalous phenomena associated with Mega Gargants, as well as the Inquisition's concluding interpretations regarding their strategic and existential significance. Classified files consistently emphasize the transcendent and unpredictable nature of Mega Gargant operations. Recovered operational logs detail instances in which these machines appear to resist destruction through conventional means, persist in partially functional states long after presumed elimination, or interact with local environments in ways that generate measurable anomalies across multiple domains: mechanical, environmental, and psychic. In one notable instance, a Mega Gargant wreck on the Renvar Expanse continued intermittent weapon activity for over 3 standard weeks following a major engagement. Astropathic monitoring documented residual psychic signatures coinciding with these mechanical emissions. Mechanicus analyses attribute some of these effects to delayed energy cell reactions and structural stress releases. However, Inquisition notes describe the consistency, timing, and scale of residual activity as exceeding expected mechanical or energetic parameters, suggesting emergent properties that cannot be fully accounted for by conventional physics or engineering principles. Additional classified reports document interactions between Mega Gargants and other war engines or Xenos constructs. In engagements with Imperial Titans, Chaos War Machines, and Necron formations, Mega Gargants have displayed behavioral and tactical anomalies that appear to influence enemy responses. Sealed Inquisition analyses record cases where opponent units unexpectedly retreated, miscalculated fire, or failed to execute standard engagement protocols. While these phenomena may have mechanical or psychological explanations, such as the immense visual and kinetic presence of the Mega Gargant, Inquisitorial reports caution that the observed patterns are sufficiently irregular to warrant consideration of emergent effects potentially arising from Ork psychosocial cohesion or localized psychic resonance. The Inquisition also maintains archival concern over environmental and warp-related phenomena linked to Mega Gargants. Post-engagement monitoring often records temporary localized weather disturbances, seismic activity, and fluctuations in warp alignment. These effects do not consistently conform to Imperial models of battlefield physics, nor do they resemble classical manifestations of demonic interference. In some cases, the disturbances have been linked to residual Ork psychic emissions, or the collective mental focus of Ork warbands, particularly during the construction, deployment, or destruction of Mega Gargants. Classified commentary within Inquisition files notes that these interactions suggest a complex interface between living cognition, psychosocial energy, and material constructs, an area that remains poorly understood and under continued surveillance. From a tactical perspective, Mega Gargants are evaluated as high-impact, high-risk assets. Their sheer destructive potential, capacity to destabilize planetary defenses, and psychological influence on both Xenos and human forces make them significant variables in strategic calculations. However, their operational lifespans are typically short due to susceptibility to attrition, mechanical failure, and concentrated counterfire. Inquisitorial conclusions emphasize that while these machines are extremely effective at the point of engagement, their unpredictability, emergent anomalies, and potential for unforeseen interactions with warp and environmental factors render them hazardous, both to enemies and indirectly to the Imperium itself, if improperly understood or encountered without preparation. Classified dossiers also include analyses of cultural and ritualistic contributions to Mega Gargant functionality. Observations repeatedly confirm that Ork crews engage in ceremonial activity prior to major operational deployment. These rituals, rhythmic hammering, coordinated vocalizations, and chanting, coincide temporally with unusual mechanical resilience and heightened combat effectiveness. While Mechanicus reports categorize these practices as socio-cultural behaviors with limited engineering effect, Inquisition analyses suggest that they may modulate emergent properties of the Mega Gargants, potentially influencing mechanical cohesion, psychic resonance, or operational reliability. This interpretation remains unconfirmed and is treated as highly speculative. Nevertheless, it is noted across multiple campaigns as a recurrent and relevant factor. In final assessment, the Inquisition frames Mega Gargants as phenomenologically exceptional constructs. They exist at the intersection of engineering, psychology, and emergent phenomena, demonstrating behaviors that challenge conventional imperial understanding of material causality and mechanical law. While their immediate tactical function is evident and measurable, their long-term effects, environmental interactions, and unexplainable residual phenomena require continued observation and documentation. Inquisitorial directives stress caution in engagement, recommend the integration of mechanicus expertise, and advise controlled dissemination of information regarding these machines to prevent misinterpretation or exploitation of their anomalous characteristics. In conclusion, the Inquisition regards Mega Gargants not solely as instruments of Ork warfare, but as dynamic loci of complex interactions between Xenos engineering, psychosocial cohesion, environmental modulation, and potentially warp-adjacent effects. These machines exemplify a class of constructs where emergent behavior and unpredictability are intrinsic to operational function. Accordingly, ongoing surveillance, archival documentation, and cross-disciplinary analysis remain priorities, as understanding the full scope of Mega Gargant phenomena is essential for both strategic preparation and the preservation of Imperial security.